Today, I want to dive into vocal production, specifically 3 things you can do to start seeing huge improvements in the tone of your vocal productions and your vocal mixes. Hey, my name's Joe Gilder. I've been making music for over half my life. I've run this channel, Home Studio Corner, since 2009. So I'm a grandpa in YouTube years. And if you are a musician trying to make music in a home recording studio, that's what I do, and that's what this channel is all about. I want to help you get there. I was a singer before I was almost anything else. I think I sang my first solo when I was 5. It was the Winnie the Pooh theme song, and I accidentally started down an entire octave lower than I was supposed to, which you don't have an extra octave when you're 5, so I was up there, deep in the 100-acre wood. It was terrible. Anyway, I've told that story before. Anyway, so I've been singing for a long time. I got better from there. It was all uphill from there. Vocals, of course, are wildly important and surprisingly tricky to record and to produce and to mix. Sometimes it feels like if you could just not have vocals, things would be great. And instrumental music is delightful, but I like to sing and I want to record myself singing. So if you feel like your vocal production or mixing process could be best described as random and erratic. Maybe you just randomly slap plugins on the vocal and you twist some knobs and you kind of look around the room and you're just kind of crossing your fingers, hoping for the best. I'm sure, as you can imagine, there is a better way. For me, today, I could sit down and dial in a vocal mix that makes me happy, which is all I really care about, right? In about 20 seconds. So if you follow the advice in this episode, that will set you on a path to be able to do that as well. And if being fast at it isn't important to you, that's really not the point. The point is you can get to a point where it's so familiar that you almost do it without thinking. You just know exactly which levers to pull to get the vocal tone that you want. And that's really what we all want. So that's where we're headed today. Specifically, I've got 3 big things I want to talk about. But first, let's jump into number 1. I want to talk about the difference between pro and amateur. Now, I understand the term professional, is probably overused here on YouTube. I've used it. But it's a helpful distinction, because whether you want to do this for a living or not, that's really not the point. You want stuff that sounds professional. You want stuff that sounds good. Stuff that if your song got picked to go on a playlist on Spotify next to a bunch of major label releases, you want yours to stand up, right? First of all, in case you didn't know, that's completely possible. There has never been a better time for creating music. We can get incredible sounds in a room over the garage in our house. That's where I am right now, using minimal equipment. Like, you don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to get great sounding music. But you do have to take on, at least in part, a bit of a professional mindset if you want to get professional results. Here, by professional, I just mean something you are proud of, something you can play for somebody else without doing that thing where you say, before I hit play, a couple of disclaimers. I'm only a hobbyist. It was only in a home studio. I know have you done that? We've all done that. One of my pet peeves, I live in the Nashville area, so I've been to many a songwriter night. One of my pet peeves, and the sure sign of an amateur songwriter, even if you are amateur, don't do this, it makes you seem more amateur, is where they give these big disclaimers before they play their songs. I despise this because it makes everyone say, oh, well, this is going to be terrible. And even if it's amazing, you're left with a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. So just side note, if you're a songwriter and you're playing songs for an audience, don't do the disclaimer thing. If you want to explain kind of where the song came from, fine. But don't say, I just wrote this and I might get the words wrong. Like, don't do any of that. It's uncomfortable for everyone. Everyone's uncomfortable instead of just you being uncomfortable. So, sorry, this is not about songwriting, but that's a pet peeve of mine. So, when we think about professional versus amateur, here's the first thing. When it comes to fundamentals, I cover the fundamentals here on this channel a lot, almost exclusively. And an amateur hears discussion about fundamentals, the basics of really any endeavor, and they say, yeah, I got that. Move on to the good stuff. That's the amateur's response to fundamentals. Yeah, but when are you going to talk about the good stuff? I used to do that, and I missed the point entirely. Professionals, on the other hand, will nod and smile when someone talks about the fundamentals because they know how important they are, and part of what makes them a professional capable of getting great sounding results consistently is that they've mastered the fundamentals. And they never outgrow the fundamentals. You just go deeper into them. And that's a huge, huge difference. So you may think, oh, that's not really that big of a deal, Joe. It is absolutely a big deal. Here's an example. In my business, I've made millions of dollars over the years in this business, and I still regularly get blown away when I read a book or listen to a talk or a podcast or a course or a coach tells me something that's very basic and very fundamental, like a fundamental business practice. Someone will say it in a new way, in a different way, give me a different insight into it, and my mind will be blown, and I'll go change my business as a result. I don't sit around and go, yeah, I've heard that one before. Give me something new, something shiny. If you chase after shiny things, you don't ever find them, and you also don't get results where you are. Now, that's a business example, but it applies to really any endeavor. You probably have more than one hobby. I love music. I also love business. I also sort of love pickleball, although my knee doesn't love it. And so I will study pickleball. And guess what? When I watch a video about like super advanced techniques, I don't get much out of that. It doesn't make me any better. But when I hone the fundamentals, it actually does have a little bit of an improvement in my actual game. That's the point here. So if you find yourself going, even just in your head, yeah, move on. I get comments like this all the time from people like, oh, you could have said this in 2 minutes. Okay, you're missing the point entirely. Sometimes it takes time. Being good at something takes some time. Gaining mastery over something isn't something you're going to do in 30 seconds. It takes time. And sometimes it takes hearing it over and over for a lifetime before you really grasp it. For those of us that go to church, I've heard the story. I understand the story of the gospel. I've understood it for a very long time. I still need to hear it because I forget, or I need to hear it in a different way that helps me believe it a little bit more today than I did yesterday. That's the same idea here. So I will continue to go down the path of sharing and exploring and going deeper into the fundamentals because that is the best way that I can serve you. And guess what? It's how I get better as well. Everything I'm teaching to you, I'm teaching back to myself too. I got a finger pointed at you. I got 3 more pointed back at me. This is a joint venture between you and me. I'm getting better alongside you. So, welcome. But like I said, you don't outgrow the fundamentals. If you find yourself getting sick of the fundamentals, you probably have missed the point. Circle back and try again. Here's another big difference between professionals and amateurs. Professionals, this is specifically related to like equipment, software, hardware. Professionals get excited about new gear. Sure, we all do. I have gear. I'm not anti-gear, but there's a very big difference between how professionals and amateurs view their equipment, both hardware and software, plugins, things like that. Professionals get excited about it because they've already mastered the fundamentals, so they know that they can use that gear to its fullest and get great tones out of it. Imagine like a world-class guitar player. My recent video, I talked about John Mayer. Whether you think he's amazing or you're not a huge fan, doesn't really matter. He is a good guitar player and is considered one of the greats. Imagine putting him with what we call a newbie guitar player who's just been playing for a few years. You give them the same rig and you say, here's a guitar, go dial in your tone. Who's going to dial in better tone? My money is on John Mayer. Not because of the gear and not even because of the specific settings he uses necessarily. It's bigger than that. He knows the tone that he's going for in his head. He's got a tone in his head that he is aiming for, and then he's learned how to manipulate the rest of the environment, the guitar itself, the settings on the guitar, the pickup, the volume, the tone, the settings on the amp, how hard he plays, the notes that he plays, the way he holds the pick. All of these thousands of different variables go into him playing and saying, that's some good tone. Now, an amateur could copy the settings, but that's about as far as an amateur can go. I'm playing, my fingers are on the same notes, and I use the same settings, why don't I sound like him? Because you have not gained mastery yet. So while a professional gets excited about gear for what they know they can achieve with it, an amateur gets excited about things like memorizing settings and like things like presets. I say that with a little bit of a look on my face. I think presets, like going and saying, here are the settings to use, I think that can be a useful temporary stepping stone on your way to mastery. But a professional doesn't need those, because a professional sits down and says, ooh, here's the sound that I hear. Here's the sound that I want to hear. Here are the things I'm going to do to go from A to B. A professional knows the sound they're going for. An amateur says, I don't know what I'm going for, but I'm going to keep turning knobs or keep copying settings until something good comes out of it. It makes me think of, you know that song? It's a Red Hot Chili Pepper song. Forgive me, I'm forgetting the name, but the one that goes, if you are a guitar player, go listen to that song. If you're not a guitar player, it's really interesting. So he's just playing two notes. Bum, bum, bum. It's up an octave and then up a step. Just about any guitar player could technically play those notes. Boo, 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 doo, boo, boo, boo. Boo doo boo 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 boo. It's not that many notes to play. What's interesting is the way that he plays it. He's not just playing single notes. He's strumming the entire guitar, and he's using his left hand to simultaneously play the correct note, but then to also mute the other 5 strings that aren't playing. So he's going with his right hand, playing all the strings, so it gives this percussive, loud, strummed tone, but then the way he's using his left hand is muting everything but the one note that he needs. This is an example of mastery versus amateur. An amateur could play those notes technically, but it doesn't sound anything like the real thing because he's not actually playing it like the real thing. I'm not here, by the way, I occasionally get people who send me emails or leave comments of like, oh, you're just making fun of beginners. It's not that at all. Guess who was also a beginner? Everyone. And it's kind of like, I'm a parent. I've got 3 kids. You sometimes see your kid going down a path and you know it's going to be painful. And so you try to give them some advice, but you also want to let them live their lives and help them when the painful thing happens, and you've got to kind of navigate that pain. I kind of feel that way here for people who are amateurs and they want to get better, but they're kind of stubborn and want to continue down the path of memorizing presets and watching another 12-minute tutorial to get another trick that they can just copy and paste into their session and then wonder why their music isn't sounding any better. That's the thing that I get frustrated with. Not because I'm better than you. I probably am better at this than you, but not because I feel superior to you, but just I've gone down the road you're going down, and I see how it's such a dead end, and I want to just take a slight turn here, and I can see the end of that path is something that's way more fun than staying in that land of just collecting little tips and tricks and actually becoming a professional in the sense of you go deeper into the fundamentals. You're no longer guessing as to what to do. The only guesswork you might do is, I wonder what guitar part this song needs. But you're not guessing of like, I don't know how to get the tone to sound right. Like all of that, you can do. It's second nature. You don't really think about it anymore. You're just focused on the music. That is for me like the ultimate. Like that's where we're trying to get to, where we're not just constantly guessing. We're not hung up in the technology. We're just making music, and the technology is very, very, very secondary. That's another kind of key differentiator between pros and amateurs. They both can get excited about technology, but generally speaking, the amateur is way more excited and way more focused on the technology, the software, the plugins, than the pro. The pro loves it, and they'll both nerd out about it. That's the problem when an amateur watches a pro talk about gear. The pro is passionate about it, but the pro is also spending 10 times more of their time on making music than the amateur, who's spending 10 times more time on the gear and like tweaking and learning and memorizing presets. So my advice to you is to make a shift. Focus more on fundamentals, focus more on making music rather than like memorizing presets, and watch what happens. And you may think, okay, Joe, that sounds nice, Mr. Guy on YouTube. How do I do that? That leads me to our second point, which is I want to teach you a little concept called the production pyramid. So I'm going to draw this. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify, which, by the way, if you didn't know, as of fairly recently with this kind of new format of videos, these are now also podcast episodes. So if you're a podcast listener, go subscribe to Home Studio Corner. Leave me a review also. That would be super great because the podcast was retired for like 5 years and it's back. So it's like a 15-year-old podcast or something like that, 13 years old. But it's been a while. So a couple reviews would be helpful. So thank you. That'd be great. Thanks in advance. The production pyramid. If you are watching or listening, imagine a pyramid, which is just a regular old triangle. And we're going to divide this pyramid into basically 5 layers, 5 levels, okay? There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, okay? When we think about a pyramid, and if you're listening, you haven't seen, I just drew an amazing looking pyramid. I am very impressed with myself. When we think in terms of a pyramid, the way to think about it is what's on the bottom is the foundation. It's the most important part. And everything on top of it has to be built on the foundation, right? I wasn't there when the pyramids were built in Egypt, but I'm pretty sure they started with the bottom and moved up. That's the way we're thinking about this here. So at the very bottom level of this pyramid is the song itself. Before we get into all the fun stuff we like to talk about with music production, we have to think in terms of the song itself. The next level is the performance. So how is the singer singing the song in this example? The next step up from that are the tracks. So this is actually the recordings themselves. And then up above that, we have the mix and the master. Those kind of go hand in hand, but you can have them in separate phases. Here's what happens. A whole lot of people want to focus all their attention on those top 2 sections, on the mix and the master, really just the mix. I could do a vocal mixing tutorial every day for the rest of my life, and people would go nuts over it because, yes, of course, we want to learn how to mix vocals, but it's just a piece of the puzzle, and I would argue it's one of the less significant pieces of the puzzle. If you were to genuinely focus most of your attention on the bottom 3 sections, on the song itself, on the performance of that song, and then on the tracks themselves, before you ever gave any attention to the mix. I mean, I know you have to do it in that order, but a lot of people want to rush through those bottom 3 just to get to the quote-unquote good stuff. I would argue that 80% of the quality of your final product happens in those bottom 3 phases. Better song, better performance, better tracks. That will lead to a better mix and master. Yes, we got to learn how to mix and master for sure. That is the top 20%, and that part matters. We could certainly ruin it in the mix, right, if we don't know what to do with the tracks once they've been given to us or once we've recorded them. But it's to me, it's significantly less important if the other pieces are in place. So what does this mean? Like, what do I mean by song? Well, by the way, this pyramid applies to anything you do in the studio. We happen to be talking about specifically vocals today, but you could apply this to anything. So when we're thinking specifically about vocals, let's think about the bottom layer, the song, for a second. What does it mean to think about the song in terms of vocals? The big thing for me is you need to become a student of melody. Melody is the language that the vocal sings, right? That's the language the vocal uses. Yes, lyrics matter. We're not really talking about that today. Specifically, become a student of melody. When I produce for other people, especially when they are singing in the studio, I take the role of producer seriously, and I come alongside them and coach them through the vocal sessions. It's easier to do because I'm a singer myself, so I can sing things with them. We can talk through, how do we want to sing this line? All of that stuff is super helpful. But before even all of that comes the melody itself. In my band, Stare Down, the drummer Tim has said a number of times that I feel like one of the biggest contributions I make to the band is to the melody. Because a lot of times Tim will come with a song and a melody idea, and I might take the last half of that chorus melody and change the rhythm and the melody a little bit, just a little bit, or maybe change it altogether into something that fits the song and kind of matches where we're going with the music a lot better. And he'll always comment of like, you're such a master at melody. I'm not saying this to pat myself on the shoulder. I don't need that. I'm just saying knowing melody is a super helpful thing. You might think, well, how do I know melody? A big part is just listen to the greats, right? Go listen to anything Paul McCartney has ever sung. He's a master at melody. You could insert just whatever your favorite band is. Go listen with a specific ear towards what's going on in the melody, and you will discover some fascinating things, especially if you transpose the melody and play it on a keyboard or on a guitar. Occasionally that can be really interesting to hear. What are they doing? Oh, wow, they're doing these big jumps in the melody. Or is it moving a lot? Or does it stay in a certain range for the verse and then move somewhere different for the chorus? There are all kinds of strategies you can use with melody to give the entire song a lift without changing anything to the recording or the production, just in changing the melody. So the more you become a student of melody, the better off your whole productions will be, and that being the foundation of the vocal track is the melody itself. It makes sense that we spend some time on that. I will coach songwriters who come in here to my studio. I'm not like going in to try to change their thing, but occasionally if they say, hey, what do you think about this melody? I'll generally have an idea, and we'll at least explore, is this a better idea than that for the melody? And we may decide yes, we may decide no, but it's good to have that skill set that you can bring to the table, even if it's just your own stuff that you're recording. Let's move a step up to the performance. The performance is, of course, who is performing. Are they a good singer? Have they practiced, right? These are important things. And then the performance itself. Are they pushing too hard? Are they sharp? Are they flat? Are they giving it the right emotional depth? Are they holding back and singing more falsetto, or are they pushing hard? And when and where should they do all of those things? This kind of goes hand in hand with the melody piece, but this is something that, especially when I record vocals for my band, I generally have the guys in the room with me. I could do it by myself, but it's helpful to have them in the room to say, hey, what do you think about if I sing it this way? Maybe the melody stays the same, but one, I'm singing it very lightly and falsetto. The other, I'm digging in. Their feedback is super helpful, and we kind of agree together how this is going to go. On our recent song, Irrelevant, which I just posted last week, you can go see it on the channel, Joel came into the vocal tracking session. He's the bass player. He said, what if we did the choruses like that Foo Fighters song, All My Life, where in the verses, he's kind of almost whispering. He's like, all my life, I've been searching for something. And so we imitated that a little bit in the way I sang the vocal. I sang it a little more subdued, a little more breathy in the verses, and then kind of cut loose in the chorus. And it was a great idea, and it worked super well. That was all about the performance. We still haven't talked about microphone choice, mic placement, compression, EQ, reverb, none of that junk, because these are the things that matter even more. Now let's talk about the tracks themselves. This has to do with the actual recording that we capture. Once we have the song and the performance down, we got to capture something well. I did a whole video called Stop Recording Vocals Like This, where I talk about my favorite way to record vocals, which is instead of recording 5 to 10 takes, full takes of the vocal, and then comping the best performance, I'd rather sing it once, and if it's not great, delete it, sing it again until it feels good, and then punch in the sections that need work. That's the way I like to work. It's a lot faster. It's a lot more fun. It's not right for everybody, but as a lifetime singer myself, and I'm able to sing really consistently, I can get the sound that I want pretty quickly. That has saved me gobs of time in the studio, and I would argue made the whole process more fun and enjoyable, because we're getting to the finish line so much faster because we're not spending countless extra hours recording a bunch of extra takes, then listening to all the extra takes, and then painstakingly comping between them. It's a pretty quick process. I encourage you to inject speed into your process whenever you can. Not to make it frantic, not to make it hectic, but to make it better. I've got a whole week-long challenge masterclass that I do. It's like a 5-day coaching experience where we spend 1 to 2 hours together per day going through my entire mixing process. It's called the Speed Mixing Challenge. If you have not checked it out yet, I highly recommend getting a ticket to the next one. Go to speedmixingchallenge.com to check that out, and upgrade to the Premier Pass. That gets you into a private Q&A with me every day, where I can coach you and help you with your biggest frustrations in your studio. Come to the Speed Mixing Challenge. This is where we will cut your mixing time in half and help you make more and better music than you ever thought possible. Anyway, go check that out, speedmixingchallenge.com. But that's the same mindset I use in recording. I'm trying to get through the process quickly and efficiently so that when the song's done, we can like mix it quickly and get it out the next week. And we're still excited about the music when it goes out to the world versus spending 6 to 8, 12, 18 months on a song to when we finally share it with the world. We're so sick of this song by then. I'm not saying that's bad or the end of the world, but it's really fun to have a song that didn't exist a month ago. It's now out on Spotify, Apple Music, and all the other platforms because we were able to move efficiently. That's super fun. I recommend it. That's a lot of fun. All right, let's move on to the mixing and mastering section, specifically mixing. Once we have the tracks recorded and we've done a good job with the song and the performance and the tracks themselves, now what do we do? This is where probably my biggest piece of advice I could give you, of all the advice I could give you, of all the things I've learned over the last over half my life of making music, is you can't really get anything done in a mix until you know your frequencies. Now, this is an example where you might go, yeah, I know my frequencies. But do you? If I say 800 hertz, can you hear that in your head? If I say 200 hertz, and then I say 100 hertz, and then I say 50 hertz, do all of those in your head kind of sound the same? If so, you don't know your frequencies. I'm not judging. That's just the truth. 50 and 200 are 2 octaves apart. They could not be more different. Yes, they're all generally in the lower end of the frequency spectrum, but if you're trying to solve a 50 hertz problem with an EQ at 200 hertz, you'll never solve that problem. And that's true across the entire spectrum. And it's especially true with vocals. Vocals have a whole bunch of frequencies and a whole bunch of spots where they can become really problematic. They can get too warm down at 200 and muddy. They can get weird in the mid-range and almost hollow sounding. At the upper mids at like 2.6K, there can be this really annoying ringing frequency that can happen. And then the high frequencies between sibilance and wanting some air in the vocals, those can be really challenging. There's a lot to know. And if you don't know those things intimately, you're left, like I've seen some of my clients, where they pull up a vocal, they put an EQ on it, and I'll be sitting in the room with them, and they'll kind of just look at me and say, I don't know, what do I do now? You've got to know how to identify what the problems are and then know the technique to go in and fix those problems. Here's an example. I was singing at my church a couple of weeks ago, and the regular sound engineer was gone, and so there was a substitute. And he doesn't do a lot of live sound, but he knew enough to like run the system. And he was... he knows what I do, so he knows that I know like how to mix and all that. And at some point, we got done with rehearsal, and I told him, I was like, man, my monitor just doesn't sound right. The one down here, it sounds like there's this big buildup. Would you mind if I just grabbed the iPad and just EQ'd my monitor? We can put an EQ just on my monitor itself. It won't mess with your front of house mix. I'm not trying to overstep here, but I need it to sound a little bit different. Because what I was hearing was a big buildup at like 800 hertz, just a ton of mid-range on my voice, which isn't normally there. And so he let me have the iPad, put an EQ on the monitor. So I'm just EQing just my speaker. And I was on the mic just saying check 1, 2, singing a little bit. And I found it was about 800. And I just did a big cut. I pulled it way down at 800, and it sounded a lot nicer. Sounded a lot more like what I was expecting to hear out of the monitor. And he looked at the EQ I did. He said, oh, that's the exact opposite of what I was doing on your vocal channel. And I said, tell me more. What do you mean? He goes, well, I was trying to get more clarity out of your voice, so I just kept boosting 800 hertz to get clarity. This is why it's so important to know your frequencies, because clarity is not 800 hertz. He maybe just, in his mind, he just thought 800's pretty high, right? No, 800 is like this. Wah, 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 wah. That's about 800. So if you push 800 on my voice, it kind of sounds like this. It makes me sound more lo-fi. It makes it sound this weird, like I call it kind of like the alto range of frequencies. Like if you think about the notes that an alto sings in a choir, it's like boosting just those frequencies. So it did not bring any clarity. Clarity is way further up, like 5K and above. Maybe you could make a case for 3K, but he was many, many octaves away from the clarity range. Now, I'm not saying that to throw him under the bus. It's just he just doesn't know his frequencies. That's not what he does normally. He's not normally a sound engineer. He was just kind of filling in. And that's the case for most people, I think. You think, I don't like the way this sounds, and then you kind of just sit on your hands and say, well, I guess I'm going to start boosting and sweeping until I don't like something, and I'll pull it down. That doesn't work super well, because guess what? When you boost anything, no matter what frequency you're boosting, it's going to sound bad. So you're going to boost it wherever you boost it. You're going to say, ooh, that sounds bad. Let me pull that down. Then you boost another frequency. Ooh, that sounds bad. Let me pull that down. And you look and your EQ looks like a comb. It's just like all these notches. All you've done is just ruin it. At best, it sounds different. Certainly doesn't sound better. So what's the alternative? How do we learn our frequencies? The first step is just to decide that that's what you want to do. I am going to become fluent in frequencies. You can start specifically related to vocals, but really you want to be fluent in frequencies as it pertains to any instrument, because that is the key to unlocking great mixes for you. The time you spend developing your frequency vocabulary, as it were, is some of the best time you could ever spend. I would argue that maybe should be at the top of your list of things you need to do if you are currently not happy with the sound of your mixes. If you want to know how to do that really well, we cover that on day 3 of the Speed Mixing Challenge. There'll be a link below. Day 3, we talk all about how to develop what we call golden ears, how to develop that specific frequency vocabulary. It's super helpful. It will get you way further down the path. Come to the challenge. It's super cheap. You'll love it. Come check it out. All right, the final thing I want to talk about, we talked about the difference between pro and amateur as it relates to fundamentals. We've talked about the production pyramid and kind of maybe rearranged your focus on what is actually the most important. Final thing, and this is kind of surprised me as I was working this out, but for a lot of people, one of the biggest struggles they face, especially if you're like me and you're recording yourself in your studio and you're kind of the only one involved, a lot of people don't like the sound of their own voice. Remember the first time you heard yourself on an answering machine? You probably didn't like it. I didn't like it. I remember as a kid, I would answer the phone and, I was 9, 10, 11 years old. My voice hadn't changed yet. And so I would say, hello. And the lady on the other end would go, oh, hey, Sharon, which is my mom's name. And I would be so mad because I'm like, I'm a man, or at least I'm a boy. I'm not a mom. So I'd try to answer, be like, hello. And they'd be, hey, Sharon. I'm like, it's got me again. So not liking the sound of your own voice. First of all, that's probably true for everyone on some level, at least in the beginning. But also it's very likely that you're being unfair to yourself. It's very likely that you listen to your own vocal recordings with a different set of ears than you listen to anyone else's recording. So you might listen to a vocal recording from me and you listen to it very kind of normally. But then when you listen to yourself, it's like you put on different ears and you're so much more critical of your own voice than of anyone else's. I do this. It's a struggle you're going to kind of have your entire life. I think it's just a part of the process. But just the other day, I was listening to, I think it was a U2 song. I can't remember if it was from Joshua Tree or later, but when I listened, I made a decision to listen really critically to Bono's vocal, like as if I was him, as if I was going to be like super critical, just as an exercise. And as I listened, I thought, he's a little pitchy. His tone's a little weird. He doesn't really hold that note out super well. He was going for this note, didn't quite get there. His voice is a little wobbly in that section. I noticed all these things. And it was kind of a mind-blowing moment for me, because when I zoom back out and just listen with like normal, I love this music ears, I love the music. It's fantastic. But when I threw my critical ears on, suddenly Bono, one of the greatest rock stars of all time, was sounding more and more amateur to me. The lesson here isn't that Bono needs to get better. It's that I got to work on the way I listen. That is the lesson. By the way, I had an email the other day from somebody who said, what is wrong with the music industry? Every song that anyone releases has these terrible frequencies up in the upper mid-range. Why does nobody notice this? Why does nobody fix it? Why am I the only one who hears this? If that's you find yourself saying things like that, like my music sounds amazing, everyone else's sounds terrible, that should be a red flag. That maybe you're wrong. Maybe the problem is you and not everyone else. If that's you, you don't like what I just said. But I've done this before where I've had a song that I've mixed, this is years ago, or I think I was mastering, and I had way too much low end, just too much bass frequencies. It sounded fun in the studio, but then everywhere I listened, it felt like it was too much bass. And then I remember going through, Apple Music and just pulling up different songs. And I kept going to all sorts of different songs from all sorts of different artists, just trying to find somebody who had as much bass in their master as mine. And I think I found like one that was close. The rest, they all sounded thin compared to my glorious master with all that extra low end. That was a red flag. If I listen and say, man, mine sounds better than everyone else on the planet, all these Grammy award-winning albums, mine sounds better. Pump the brakes, darling. You might have put on different ears again, and you're hearing things not really accurately. Or you think yours sounds better, but actually yours is just boomy, or yours is just excessively bright, and theirs is much more balanced, which is why you can't find anything that sounds close to what yours sounds like, because yours sounds bad. I'm not saying that to judge. I just told you a story about how I did that. I still can fall into that trap. That's why it's important to know what good music sounds like, and then make sure that you're listening to good music in your studio, in your mix position regularly, so that you can recognize good music. And then if yours comes across and anything's bad about it, you know how to go in and fix it. Making music is the final piece of advice. Making music is the best way to get better at making music. So if you want to get better at vocal production, yes, all the stuff we talked about, yes, you should probably learn more things, but the biggest thing you can do is spend a lot of time with your voice, a lot of time recording and mixing. If you want to give yourself a 30-day challenge to record vocals for a new song every day, record it, do a quick mix, record it, do a quick mix, guarantee you'd be better in 30 days. You will have had so much more experience in just 30 days than 30 days of watching tutorials or something else. All right. In case you didn't know, I love mixing, and I typically just use stock plugins on my mixes, the stuff that comes with Studio One, because I haven't found that I need much else. But I did develop my own plugin. I basically took all the things I like to put into my vocal mixes and put it all into one plugin. It's called GilderVox, and you can check it out for free. I think there's a 14-day free trial, or you can just go buy it because it's really inexpensive. It allows you to dial in a vocal tone super quickly. If you've got the other pieces in place, you've got a great melody, a great performance, and you've recorded a great track, this will get you a killer vocal tone on the mix in just a couple of seconds. If that sounds intriguing to you, I'd love for you to go check it out. Just go to GilderVox.com or check the link in the description. So, if you find vocals to always be challenging, it doesn't have to be that way. They don't have to always defeat you. You can get to a point, I'm talking to you right there, you right there. You can get to a point where you are capable of consistently getting stunning vocal recordings and stunning vocal mixes that make you proud. You just got to stick with it, keep going, put in the reps. You've got this. I'm good at vocal recording and mixing, not because I was born with special ears or anything else, but just because I put in some time, put in some work, and got better. And you can do the same. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching or listening. I'll see you next week.